I want to thank Steve and also Brian for putting this conference together. Let's give them a hand. Very good. So I'd like to open up with a prayer which is about the merging of the heavens and the earth. And it really helps us understand the whole meaning of why and how vegan live foods, and really why and how we're here. Because I think everyone at some level knows you have to have both of that for a full holistic view. So I'm just going to open with that prayer. Hashem Yakud Kudushabrihu Ushihinte Bi Ilu or Imulaiha Shem Yuke Bavavke B'Yidar Shalom Hashem Kozrael Ko Olam. Amen. So just feel that merging of the heavens and earth within yourself. Okay. I'm going to start with, you heard a little bit, but I'm going to do a little show and tell, because one of my missions, which is what this lecture is about, is how to succeed. This is very important. Succeed on a live food vegan diet. And there are a few things you need to know, and that's what I'm going to be sharing in this whole dialogue. Because when you're doing such a powerful thing, it's like riding a wild horse. You got to know how to ride, or you may not do so well. So, but why? What is this all about? So, the Greek physician said it very clearly. When health is absent, wisdom can't reveal itself. Okay, art can't manifest. Strength can't fight. Wealth becomes useless, and intelligence cannot be applied. And if we look around the world today, we are seriously having an intelligence problem. Okay? And in all seriousness, people's minds aren't working well, really around the world, not just the United States, okay? And I'll be talking about this tomorrow, but radiation is literally frying people's brains. Literally, not metaphorically, oxidizing the brains, causing not only diabetes and thyroid, but also serious amounts of depression, anxiety, and mental confusion. This is real, okay? And they don't talk about it much, but that's what's going on. 75 to 95% of the world population is iodine deficient. If we don't have iodine, our brain doesn't work. The main cause of mental retardation on the planet is iodine deficiency. So this is literal. Okay. So this is the tree of life. We're an eco-spiritual rejuvenation center. I've been involved in the whole ecology movement since 1973. And from 73 to 76 up in Mendocino, we lived off the grid for 3 years. That's not the easiest thing to do, but we do that. And now in this center, we're all solar, all 181 acres. Everything's solar. Okay. We also do water collection. Okay. And our wells are all solar. All the electricity is solar. It's kind of exciting. So just to give you an idea, we're very, very involved in that way of life. Now behind this is the entrance, and everything on there is organic architecture. See these gates? Well, you can't see it so well from here, but the gates themselves, that's straw bale. You're looking at straw bale gates. And behind us, if you kind of use imagination, you can see a face, the mountain, red mountain, a face and the breast, like a woman laying down. Can you see that? So we have that energy of the Divine Mother behind us. This is where we do the Native American spirit dance. I'm also a 4-year sun dancer and did really what no one else quite could do, that really got the Native Americans interested in live food and veganism. There's a thing called the Eagle Dance. So you dance 4 days without food and water, standing. So that impressed people. Hey, I think I got to check out. Because when I first went there, it was like, you want some buffalo stew? I'm serious. That's what they. But after 4 years, it's like, okay, I think we're going to start serving vegan food. So we can be like that energy. So, and I was also the oldest there too. So it works. And it really does make you active and powerful. This is a little bit some of the views. This is the downward awakening energy. And then you see the rainbows afterwards. You can see the third eye and the heart. It's a double rainbow. The second part you can't see as well. And this is all straw bale construction, different variations of straw bale organic natural construction. This is casitas, some of the places where people stay. This is our cafe. It's another form of straw bale. Literally, you take the straw bales, put rebars in, and put a roof on top, and it compresses it down, and that's it. That building, that's what that's built. And mostly we eat outdoors. It's Arizona, you know. This is a mikvah, a cleansing pool, shape of the womb. We do a lot of Native American work. This is a medicine wheel. This is, after a 4-year Sundance, I also lead Inipi, sweat lodges. That's me doing the pipe ceremony. That's Shanti, my wife, on the left there. Now, this is a solar run dome. We do a lot of work. And we do something very unique. It's vegan organic. Organic, veganic. Why? Anybody got an idea? Okay. You've been hearing about GMOs, right? Okay. Well, the animals get fed, the cows and all that stuff, get fed often GMO food. Then, what do? Their manure is GMO'd. Their bone meal, blood meal, it's GMO'd. There's only one way to guarantee non-GMO food. Organic, veganic farming. Did you follow that? There's no GMO, no manure. So we're like the world-leading teaching center in organic, veganic farming. And we have apprentices, and we have various levels of program. Now this solar dome, totally energy independent, okay, can operate at 25 degrees below zero. Kind of interesting, huh? And this is what it looks like inside. It's like the Garden of Eden. All seasons. This is what we're looking at. So you notice there's kind of coverings on everything, and there are some issues which you're aware of. We have radiation issues, we have chemtrail issues, and so we cover all our food. Because we did some measurements, and the radiation inside versus outside is 1/5. It's hard to get away from all of it, but 1/5 is a big deal. So organic, veganic. Now, this is kind of what it looks like. Now, we're concerned, and that's why the solar dome, as I said, I've been involved in the whole ecological movement in a very real way, obviously, since '73. And when Al Gore said inconvenient truth, and he didn't talk about animal aquaculture, it kind of pushed a few buttons. I said, what's going on? There's something wrong here. Fine, 9%, we know NASA says 9% CO2 is global warming. Okay, good. 18% is animal agriculture. Okay? We're talking CO2, that's nice, but methane is 26 to 29 times more global warming gas. And manure, nitrogen, anybody know how much more global warming that is? How about 296 times more global warming? And animal manure is huge, and the United States contributes a tremendous amount. 60% of the global warming gases is the nitrogen. So it's like, wow. And he ignored that? Okay, so I say, what's going on? And I've been kind of looking at this question because I have a certain investment. I'm a farmer at one level. We didn't put that in because here we go, we're farming. We eat this food. And it's like, how are we going to sustain? And I'm going to tell you a possible inconvenient truth, okay? And only 31,500 global weather scientists have already signed on this issue. 31,500, 9,000 PhDs, and 2,000 MDs, interesting, involved with global ecology. Now, what did they sign on to? Now, you're not going to want to hear this, but maybe many of you do. And that is, there's not a sufficient evidence to show that we're in global warming. Wow! That's heresy. Okay, and then I'm looking like, what's going on with this picture? And then I ran across a book by John Casey. Now, what we have today is a huge problem. Science is being invalidated. How many people are aware of that? You know, I do a lot of work with the vaccination question. It's like in the CDC, for example, John Thompson did this, they eschewed the data, so it made it seem like there's no connection between autism and MMR. And when this got exposed, he admitted that he did this. It turns out that in African American communities, the rate of autism was 3.26 times higher. Okay, and there's actually about 60 studies around the world that shows a connection with autism and vaccination. But you can't hear that in the United States. That's against politically correctness, because we want to vaccinate everybody. Okay, well, we have the same problem all over the place. And as I'm researching it a little further, it's like, oh gosh, what is going on? I'm finding research that's showing the temperature monitors all over the world have been altered slightly to make it look like global warming. Now, what I see is global warming did happen. So we're not denying global warming. But as I researched it further, I said, oh, maybe there's more than humans in this story. And it turns out that there's a 200-year cycle. And this, I look at who's writing the research. So this is a guy named John Casey. He was a White House consultant on the whole aerospace, and he was a major engineer on the whole rocket science in terms of NASA and so forth. Like, he's very well connected. He retires to Florida and he starts looking at this research. He says, this is wrong. And he identified, apparently other researchers around the world have also identified, a 200-year cycle of global warming and cooling. How many people remember the French Revolution, 1789? Well, you weren't there, okay? But I understand that. But there was a revolution because they were having global warming and there was no food. Let them eat cake. Okay, well, that's what that statement's from. And then, how many people remember Napoleon being defeated? 1812. Global warming, and the big winner that defeated Napoleon, global cooling. And guess what? We're 200 years later, and we're in a cycle, a sunspot cycle of 200-year cycles of warming cooling. It's going on for thousands of years. So John Casey wrote this book called Dark Winter. It's like, oh, now I got it. I see it. So I'm preparing, because it really matters to me. It's not a theoretical discussion, more for greenhouse systems that can deal with global cooling, which is maybe going to be 2 to 3 degrees cooler. The last 18 years, even with all the fiddling with it, there's been no warming on the average. But we did have warming before, and now 2030 to 2050, we will hit like Napoleon's 1812. We're going into global cooling. Now, how are you going to know? You got to wait a few years, okay? But some of us have noticed that was a little cold on the East Coast, okay? And where we are, it's usually really hot. It's in the triple digits now, and it's in the 70s to 80s, and it never rains at this time of year. So something's shifting. All I want to do is throw in that it isn't a closed science. When I got 31,500, people, 9,000 of them being PhDs, saying, hey, there isn't enough science to confirm global cooling. I got to say, let's throw in a question of doubt here. Yeah. Let's keep the debate open. Okay, good. So that's the farmer's perspective, okay? And I'm serious. I got to make this work, okay? And here we are. This stores about 1.5 million gallons. This is a labyrinth made of crystals that we found on the land. It's the largest chartreuse labyrinth in the world. It does snow occasionally, once a year. Now, this is my wife and I doing a little yoga. Don't do this unless you practice. This is much harder than it looks, okay? And we do have a yoga class and a Shaktipat meditation tomorrow morning starting at 6:30. This is our little temple. And this is some international work. I'm in East Jerusalem meeting with a very important Muslim sheikh. Here we're doing a Jews fast in Israel. This is just some of the fasters. I'm speaking to 400 vegans in Israel. It's the second largest vegan country in the world. First is India, then comes Israel, 8.6% of the population, which is great. And then we have the US, about 3.3, England, about 3.2, and so forth. So it's happening. I go all over the world promoting it in different ways. Here we are at the Dead Sea, a little muddy there, but it's fun. Okay, this is 2012. Now, I also do a lot of work with Native Americans. This is Dennis Banks. He came, healed his diabetes. He's 76. Some people, anybody remember Dennis Banks? He's the leader of AIM, American Indian Movement. So we have projects that we're trying to get started with healing on a big level Native American. The chief shaman from Alaska also came and healed his diabetes. So those two are heading our two Native American programs that will be based on the reservations. We did a walk across America for diabetes, and here we are in Washington, D.C., kind of connecting. This is me speaking about peace. This is Owerri, Nigeria, okay? And also known as Biafra. So here are the kids. There's one school that we pay the salaries for everybody, and we do this. Notice on their plates it's vegan food. Here we go. And we have greenhouses, wheatgrass growing, sprouts growing. It's kind of exciting what's going on, okay? So it's happening. And part of it is they know, in the African countries I'm working with, West African countries, they know the only way they get out of the food thing is to grow their own. So we're actually teaching organic, veganic farming to them. So it's kind of fun. Here we are, this is in Ghana, and I'm with different tribal chiefs and things. Here I'm giving a talk on diabetes in a town called Ho in Ghana. It's about 900 people attended. These are all tribal leaders coming. This is a lady, Bati, from Ethiopia, where we have programs there too. She came to the tree and got trained. Here she is at her center. Notice, organic, veganic life. Ethiopia, not bad. She has a senior center there, and I'm talking there. This is Oxfam, where they're opening a new medical school, and they were very open to a veganic way of treating diabetes. That's what I wanted to say. Okay, and here we are in Cameroon, and we have a diabetes center there, but also these are all women with diabetes. They have a sewing center, okay? I'm speaking in Cameroon. This is a center they named after me in Ghana, where we, again, organic, veganic food, putting in wells. We put in 54 wells. West Africa have to have clean water. Okay, Ebola, although they don't have Ebola in West where we are, but we don't want it to happen either. So we put all our emphasis in wells, and in that region we have 54 wells that we put in 28 different towns. And Tree of Life Foundation is happy to take donations because we want to put a lot more wells in. Here we are in Mexico. To the left of me is my wife, Shanti. And notice, organic, veganic food. Okay, it's an orphanage that we put together, rebuilt, and so forth. And farming is growing up around that. So we're doing this around the world. Here we are. These are some of the kids. This is Argentina, where we have a pretty big movement there. That's some of the people who came to a conscious eating workshop for 5 days. This is the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea. Their rate of diabetes is 45%. While I was there, 2 people in their cabinet died of diabetes. They have more than a little casual interest, right? So we have programs starting in Papua New Guinea. And it's really exciting how open people around the world are. And this person furthest to the right in the picture is the former Minister of Health. He also came and healed his diabetes. You know, here we are again, and this is the school that we mentioned. And our idea is to empower as many people as possible to go out and teach in a legitimate way, the veganic way. And then we have a 6-month cafe apprenticeship. And here we are. That's how you can reach us, the online, the numbers. So this is what we do, drcousens.com. You can find out more about these programs. Okay, so now let's take a look at this whole issue of organic, veganic. So in 1975, in a deep meditation, a little voice rang out and said, you should learn to eat and live in a way that supports the flow of the spiritual energy. So I took that seriously. I've been basically a vegan since 1973, but and live food, 199% live food since 1983. So I have a little experience, and it's a real challenge. It was a real challenge to sort it out, because everybody has their theories about what it's supposed to be, and what I saw, there wasn't as much success as I would like to see, and I'm going to address those problem areas so everybody can be successful. And I want to say very, very clearly, 99% of the people I work with are successful live food vegans. 99%. And that's really important, because I say it with complete confidence based on 40 years of clinical experience. We can do this. And there isn't exceptions. I had one lady live near the Arctic Circle, really, one lady in all this time. She lived near the Arctic Circle and she had to eat fish once a week. Okay, that's it. But you know, it's a slightly different genetics when you're near the Arctic Circle. Okay. And so it says, God said, behold, you know, I've given you every seed-bearing planet on the earth and every tree that has seed-bearing fruit. Now, how complicated is that? I mean, this is pretty straightforward. That's a live food vegan diet. Done. Okay, now the question is, how do we get there? Because we've lost track, right? We really have lost track. So fine. But know this is not a new idea. It didn't start with Ann Wigmore. It didn't start with Brian, myself, or Victor Cousens. It started in the Garden of Eden. Okay? And with the Anunnakis also. But then, maybe you haven't heard of a group called the Pelagasians. 3,000 years ago they lived. Herodotus pointed, the great Greek historian. Guess what? They were 100% live food, and they lived on an average 200 years. Well, that's interesting. So it's not a new idea, not something that started in the 60s, okay? And then from there, we have Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Anybody know who they are? The great Egyptian. 1300 BC, they were teaching live food. In fact, they had the whole priesthood involved doing live food vegan. And here's a picture of them, and behind them you can see the live food and the sun energy. So we're not very new at, you know, this is good. And then we go back to the Essenes, and then Pythagoras, in about 500 BC, Pythagoras had said study with the Essenes, came down, enlightened, and into live food, and his name then became synonymous with vegan. Okay? And the word vegan didn't even start till 1944. So before that, if you're a vegan, you were a Pythagorean. Little history. But it's really important to understand, not a new idea. Pretty much all of the Socrates, Plato, and Pythagoras, their schools were all live food. vegan. Go a little further, you know, and then it got lost with the Romans, which is what happens, and then really didn't get started till about the 1890s with Dr. Bertrand Brenner, and then Dr. Gerson. You've probably heard of the Gerson therapies and so forth. And he actually was a real pioneer. He was the first one to cure diabetes with live foods. And he did that with Albert Schweitzer. So that was a good way to start, okay? And then, of course, his 50 Cases of Cured Cancer came out in 1937, translated in English, I think in 1957, something like that. And then we have Ann Wigmore, and then from that, we have Brian Clement, one of the people, obviously a great leader in this whole movement, and Victor Kavinskas and myself are at kind of the next round. And then it's go on horizontal. We still hold the energy, and Brian is, I'm really pleased that he's helped put this conference together and carrying the energy. So that's an overview that there's nothing new here. So what am I saying here? I'm saying something bigger here. Diet affects consciousness, consciousness affects the mind, and mind affects our actions. What we eat affects our actions and our consciousness. To me, food is a love note from God. It's kind of returning its status. Okay? So, in that context, and one of the themes of the why part of this is beyond all question, okay, our present, future, and very much the survival of the planet depends on our organic, veganic, live food diet, the consciousness of holistic live food veganism. And just take that in, because that is becoming more than just us being this one little small group of people thinking about these things. It's a big deal. Now, what about the effects of live food? In my master's program, one of our students did an interview on 525 people, and they had been on live foods at least 80%. And that's, you don't have to be 100%, incidentally. What I've observed clinically is if you're 2 years on 80% organic, veganic, live food, the other 20% being cooked veganic, that really does the job. At 95, 99%, you're talking much faster results and a little bit more becoming a superconductor of the divine type of energy. But, and I won't go through the whole thing, but we're looking at major shifts in consciousness. So later we'll be talking about depression and things like that. 400% decrease in depression, 300% decrease in anxiety, 32% decrease in addiction, and they're all connected, but that will be a different lecture. Okay? And in terms of energy, somewhere between 200 and 300% increase in energy and vitality. And that's what the Native Americans picked up when they said, what is this guy? He's older than all of us, you know, and he's standing there dancing nonstop for 4 days. It's like, what's going on? And so there's some real truth and power to that. The other thing is digestion. You know, live food takes 24 to 36 hours to get through. Cooked food takes 40 to 100 hours. So we have dramatic decrease in issues of constipation. We have big deal, and then the immune system is 92% improved. And the lady that did this was very, very interested in the effects of not just menopause, but also menses. And she saw at least a 200% improvement in the experience of menses, which is a big deal when you're on live food. And also what we saw is that the menses would, you know, decrease to really 1 day light, which is very, very healthy. If it stops, that's a myth in live food. That's not so healthy. That means you're anuric. That means you're not ready to produce. That means the body's saying, this person isn't fertile anymore. Okay? So we like to see just 1 day light And that's what we really saw happen there. Because that means you're fertile, your cycles are working, everything's good. So that's an important point. So, and then Dr. Breckman did this research from Russia where he did mice. And he fed them the same food, same calories, same everything, cooked and raw. And the mice on the raw food had 200% more energy. So it works. Now bear in mind all the things I'm talking about because we're going to come to a myth and just come think about this because this is really what goes on. Now, why live foods? And of course, that could be all day lecture, right? Okay. But look at the picture. What is that? It's 2 cabbage leaves from the same cabbage. The one above is cooked, the one down below is raw. Do you see a difference? Okay. And that difference, this is Kirlian photography, is the bioluminescence that's really there. And what does that mean? Well, first, I talk about live food as unbroken wholeness. That's a very important thing because it's the synergy of the whole thing. Now, there is a fad a little bit about blending everything. And one of our master's students did research with Kirlian photography, and we found that after 10 seconds, most people blend for 2 to 3 minutes, right? 10 seconds, there's a dramatic loss in energy. So that's really interesting. Now, I know Brian feels the same way, that this blending may be not such a good thing because he suggested some research that's been done showing there's an increased oxidation with the blending. There's also electromagnetic disruption, and we don't have the unbroken wholeness. So, but there's a blender I want to sell you on. Called your teeth. God gave us a blender. Let's not get confused here. And not only does it blend, but when we chew, we're activating all the meridians going through the teeth. Not bad. And the next thing is it increases your serotonin output by 500%. And then it also stimulates your digestion. These are really good things. There is a plan. We pay attention, and we think we're so smart. Oh, we'll do blending, we'll do speed. But we miss the whole process. So that unbroken wholeness is actually really important. Next is the biophotons. And everything gives off light. Everybody here is giving off light. When you cook food, you destroy the biophoton energy, which connects us with the cosmos. So Dr. Fritz Popp, who's still alive, from Germany, developed a machine to measure it. And he found that people eating junk food were giving off 1,000 biophotons. A person eating cooked organic, veganic food is 23,000. Newborn babies, 43,000. A live fooder is 83,000. That means 83 times more biophoton energy being given off. Biophotons are really going on with the DNA. It's all the messages intracellular and extracellular. You ever see like the fish, they all move together? That instantaneous thing, it's all biophoton energy. So all the communications in the body depend on having a level of biophoton energy. Okay, more biophoton, better communication, better organization. Everything works better. So that's what the biophoton is about. And then I talk about the subtle organizing energy fields. This is a theory I brought out in 1986. My first book, Spiritual Nutrition, the Rainbow Diet. And what I'm talking about is that everybody has a field around them. Now, I kind of started with the idea of morphogenic field, but this says this field organizes everything in our system. It's the energetic template. And when we deplete it, it doesn't work so well. When we organize it, give it energy, it becomes more organized and everything works better. DNA replicates better. Cells replicate better. Of course, that means less cancer and so forth, right? And that's the point, is that when we're eating live food and taking in the biophoton energy, we really, really are, okay, organizing that field and becoming healthier. And we have more energy and vitality. So that's part what goes on. What's that? It's a sprout giving off biophoton energy. It's a radish sprout. So one of the other points that's really important about live food is research done by Dr. Stephen Spindler, University of California at Riverside. And what he did is he took rats and he put gene chips in and he basically gave them 40% less calories. And after a month, following the gene chips, he's able to show a 400% increase in the anti-aging genes, meaning increase meaning turned on. 400% increase in the anti-inflammatory genes. Inflammation is the driving cause behind all chronic disease, including diabetes. Okay? 400% increase in the anti-cancer genes and 400% increase in the antioxidant genes. Now that's impressive. That's a huge anti-aging thing. Now, it's been translated and called caloric restriction, but on live food, different story. So when you cook food, according to Max Planck Institute in Germany, you lose 50% of the protein, gets coagulated, 60 to 70% of the minerals and vitamins, and up to 95 to 100% of the phytonutrients. Aha! Therefore, if we're eating live food, we can eat 50% less food. We're automatically doing calorie restriction. We're automatically turning on our anti-aging genes. Isn't that interesting? It's like when I made that connection, oh, this is really interesting. Okay, because that's one of the great benefits, biophoton energy and the natural caloric restriction. Okay, really, really important in the whole thing. Now, Dr. Hans Eppinger at the first medical clinic in Vienna made a really interesting discovery, and this is really in the 30s, 1930s and so forth. What he found was that people get very depleted. Like our cells are batteries, our body's a battery on one level, okay? Because we're multiple levels. And what he found is when people had chronic diseases, their battery charge was quite low. And he discovered that the only way he could get the battery charge up was live food. Supplements didn't do it. Live food did. And what's that about? Is that our little trees are out there with their leaves and they're catching the biophoton energies and the photon energies from the sun, translates as electricity. And guess what? Those electrons go into us. Now, if it goes to a cow, the cow gets the electrons. So those electrons charge your batteries. This is literal. This is not a metaphor. So when we take it in live foods, we are charging our batteries. When the battery's good charge, positive, negative, there's a good polarity, you have better health. So this is a very, very strong reason why live foods works in that way, and you have more energy. It's very common to talk about enzyme preservation, right? How many people are familiar with enzyme preservation in live food? Now, I want to challenge that a little bit, okay? Part of my job as a scientist, I challenge everything, okay? That's how you learn. Okay, and there hasn't been as much research as I would like to say on this. But what Hal found was actually just live food had 60% of the amylase you need, 30% of the protease, and only 10% of the lipase you need to digest. Well, that's not as impressive as I would think, okay? And so it does help a little bit, but there's another concept here called, when we talk about enzyme preservation, it's all built on the idea that we have a limited amount of enzymes. I completely challenge that as a false idea. We are regenerating as our telomeres get longer, if we're doing it right. And the whole lifestyle is showing that at least you can increase your telomere length by 10% a year by living the total lifestyle. Okay, which, that's pretty important. We, of course, are going to turn on and maintain our enzyme production. Does that make sense? So the idea of we have a limited amount of enzymes and we'll just run out and die is really not scientifically based at all. Okay, the telomere research is saying, oh, no. Just keep healthy, you'll make all the enzymes you need. Okay, so I bring that up because it's a common belief system, but I'm not sure that it really does what we want it to do. So the other thing about live foods is it does increase our spiritual awareness. And I've done a variety of research around that. And if it's live food vegan, all the great tradition except one, no spilling of blood. I'm not telling you what the one is, okay? But, you know, what we see clearly in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Hindu tradition, the Buddhist tradition, the Taoist tradition, no spilling of blood. Okay? In fact, the ancient rishis, 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, they were basically 95% live fooders. The Taoist masters were live fooders. I mean, there's really nothing new here. Okay? In terms of spiritual life. Well, in terms of any life, but okay. So these are some of the things that we go. Now, this is the one above is an organic seed, and the one below is a commercial seed. And there's obviously a big difference of why we want to go with organic versus commercial GMO seeds. The life force is really limited. So I want to talk about, again, points 13, 14, which is basically the outer light, when we're taking what the live foods, helps move to the inner light and kind of uplifts us spiritually and mentally as well. And what I showed, or what this research showed, is there was an 87%, let's say, increase in spiritual interest and intellectual and creative interest with people doing live foods, at 80% in that research. So that's confirmed in a variety of different ways. 87% increase in your spiritual interest and support. So that's the thing. And what's that? It's a peach. Now I bring that in because some of the early teaching said just sprouts, biogenic, have the energy. But here's a fully mature. Now here's the key. You need to eat it right away. You can't wait 3 days because it loses its energy. This is a radish sprout, it's corn sprout, cacao. Now, I like the colors of that one. Okay, this is a person who same kind of experiment where he ate junk food and ate just good organic food. The left is good organic food. There's a fingerprint there. Junk food, there's no field. This is what we're talking about. This is the pineal gland. And I want you to note that white light there, we are giving off light. See, I wasn't making a metaphor. This is a living person with laser photography, and that's us giving off light. That's the pituitary giving off the blue light. This is norepinephrine. This is epinephrine, crystalline energy. This is testosterone giving, crystals giving light. This is estrogen giving light. So you got the picture. We are light beings. When we're eating the live food, we're enhancing that light. The outer light then supports the inner light. That being said, we'll move on here. And I want to give you kind of an overview. So food is a dynamic force. That's really what I'm saying. That affects us on the physical body, mental, emotional body, energetic, and spiritual. It's working at all those levels. And if we're really going to understand nutrition, it's really the study of how our food interacts with us in the physical, emotional, mental, energetic, and spiritual levels. That's the big picture, and that's the point I'm coming from. And we're taking energy from all over. Okay? We're taking cosmic energy coming in, solar energy coming in, breath. In the yoga this morning I taught a little bit about the breath, but it's oxygen is the most important nutrient. Done. It's not a question. And as we look at oxygen and we look at, I have my little bottle of oxygen here. Where'd it go? I put it here, but I don't see it. Okay. Oh, there we go. Good. So I use this peak oxygen. I think I'll have some now. Oh, yeah. You're supposed to dilute it, but if you're at a certain level, you can just drink it. It's super oxygenated water. Super oxygenated water.
Where do you get it?
Well, you can get it from us. Health Gyms has it. Nani, if you want to raise your hand. Can you raise your hand, Nani, if you're there?
Just raises her voice.
Okay. That's her husband speaking. She's the one that creates this. And it's scalar wave activated. So it's really good. Any way we can bring oxygen in, like we did the pranayama this morning, it's really important. It's actually the measure in the German system. The amount of oxygen you have in your cells is the amount of anti-aging energy you have. That's how important it is. So it's a big deal. And then we have the earth energy and the chakra energy, and then finally food, which is really only 5 to 10% of the story. Kind of keeping that in mind. So in a sense, what I'm saying is nutrition is what we absorb in the overall, physical, emotional, mental plane, okay, from the different density levels that come from the cosmic force. So we're just taking it at different levels. Now, most of what we're talking about, and as a scientist, at the turn of the century, they were convinced they knew all they needed to know about physics. Closed deal. And then Einstein comes along and says, well, there is this theory of relativity. And now quantum physics. I mean, it goes on and on. So we should never, ever, ever, ever say this story is closed on anything. And when I hear people say that, a huge red flag goes up and says, you have an agenda and it isn't a scientific agenda. You have a political agenda, you have an economic agenda, whether it's vaccines or whatever, as I mentioned about the global cooling warming, that's a red flag. It's never done, okay? And this is the person that proved Einstein's work, and it's a beautiful statement, because everything I'm talking about live food, 10 years from now, I'll probably have a different story as understanding it, if that makes sense. Because it evolves. So we never close the door. It's a critical attitude for a real scientist. Now, we are having major problems all over the world because corporate and government businesses are actually paying the scientists, so the scientists altered their data. We see that again with the vaccination CDC. I hate to say it, but the global warming temperatures, there's real evidence that's been altered all over the world in terms of measuring it. Yeah. I'm not doing it for a political, my thing was, I'm a farmer, right? Don't bother me. But the truth is that has happened. Just last week, Switzerland, Australia, and Paraguay got caught altering their temperatures. This is not right. You can't figure out what's going on. How do you do it? The only people I trust practically are people who have no government or corporate investment. Okay. So you can see, as a scientist, this is getting hard. It's not easy, okay? So he speaks to that. He proved most of Einstein's theory, because he is a great physicist himself, Sir Arthur Eddington. Verily, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a scientific man or woman to pass through a door. And whether the door be a barn door or a church door, it might be wiser that he or she should consent to be an ordinary person and walk in, rather than wait to all the difficulties involved in a really scientific ingress are resolved. Interesting. But that's the thing about live food. I mean, truly, a lot more will be proved as more money gets pointed into the live foods. Okay, Steve mentioned about, we did the study. We did 120 diabetics. 61% are healed who are non-insulin dependent in 3 weeks. A lot more after that, 3 weeks. 3 semanas, okay, 3 weeks. And then 24% insulin dependent, 3 weeks. And then, amazing, and I'm not doing work with type 1, 21% were healed in 3 weeks. I'm talking about total, come in, type 1, all the criteria are filled. 21% off insulin with a blood sugar less than 100. It's like, that was mind-blowing to me. It's like, where did that come from? Because that wasn't my even interest. And 31% of type 1 diabetics were off all insulin. They weren't less than 100, but they're off all insulin under serious good control. Okay? So it's all kind of exciting, but you know, the point is we have to start somewhere, and we got to walk through the door. And with the live food, vegan thing, we have to walk through the door and kind of do the best we can. That's what I'm saying. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about spiritual life, just so you give an idea. This is another 2-hour lecture, or 3. This is the symbol of the Kundalini, but the key here is the nadis, which are those intertwined things. Above that, the wings are the brain, right and left side of the brain, and above that is the highest centers. And the nadis carry energy, okay? We call it Shakti Kundalini energy. We can call it the Ruach HaKodesh if we're doing the Kabbalistic system, but the same energy, okay, the same energy. And the key is don't clog your nadis. Meat, fish, chicken, and dairy clog the nadis. They bring the energy of death into the nadis. Big problem. How do you evolve when what's in your system, your chakra system, your nadis, levels of the mind called the koshas, they're all blocked with the energy of death? I mean, that's not very good. So that's why all the great traditions, no blood, no spilling of blood, no death in the system. Okay. Now, there's another thing which is very important, which I particularly noticed when I got more involved in the live food thing in the very early 80s, 1983, is that people were very imbalanced doing the live food. We've evolved from there, so I don't want to retrogress there, but basically they didn't have what we call the kapha or ojas part, which lines the nadis so they don't burn out. So we had the prana, all your greens, your sprouts, and leafy greens. I mean, that's super powerful energy, okay? And with that, we have the pitta, but we call tejas, it's the fire energy of that. But if you have air and fire, you get a bigger fire, right? And it can burn your nadis. So the lining of the nadis, called the ojas, the deep primordial vigor and reserve, had to be built up to be successful and balanced in spiritual life. And in general, too. So what is that? That's your fats. That's your omega-3s. Bee pollen, actually cholesterol. You heard about that in a minute. And chlorella and spirulina and E3 live. And, you know, these are really important. I'm not going to go through over. There's certain herbs that are really, really good, like reishi, you know, and schizander, which balances all 12 meridians. Okay? It goes on and on. And your lifestyle that doesn't burn up things. So moderate lifestyle, moderate sexuality, not over-partying, not overworking, getting adequate sleep. These play a big role in restoring and building the ojas. So I make that point because for spiritual life, but life in general, we have to have the ojas grounding part. Without that, people are what we call ungrounded. We need the ground. Ojas is the ground. It's actually water and earth. So those are the elements in our diet that are absolutely needed for long-term sustainability and strength, really. Primordial vigor, deeper than sexual energy. Okay, we have to eat in a way to do that. Okay, now, you've heard a little bit about the vegan, but that's me speaking. How about the UN, and how about really the European Commission? They're all saying one thing. This is a UN report in Livestock's Long Shadow, that this is more about the global warming gases, that animal agriculture is really the biggest force for degrading the planet. Okay? And that's being ignored. So how concerned is an Al Gore about the planet, really? He's got different agendas going on. Yeah, it's about money and global control. So this is the key. So animal agriculture is a global disaster. You know who said that? Pythagoras. He actually said, if we're going to go to animal agriculture, we're going to have wars, we're going to be fighting over resources. So this is not a new insight, it's just coming to fruition. So the bottom line is, we look at water, it's 4,500 gallons for a meat eater and 300 gallons for a vegan. That's huge. A vegan, 16 vegans can live on the resources that one meat eater uses. A meat eater uses about 400 gallons of oil, organic, veganic, 150 gallons of oil a year. And kind of look at the whole picture. The statistics vary, okay? Whether it's 8 or 28 times more, the fact is it's about 8 to 20, really 29 times more energy to produce a pound of animal protein versus a pound of plant protein. That's huge, okay? And the planet, in terms of feeding it, the grain to feed 2,000 people only feeds 100 cows. 60 to 80%, depending on the grain, doesn't go to feeding people, but goes to feed cows. Now, why is that important? Well, it's real simple. How about 42,000 kids starve to death each day? Each day. About 15 million kids starve to death each year. Maybe about 40 million. The estimates are variable, whether it's 40 or 60 or 20, it's going to vary, but that's a lot of people. How about knowing this? More people have died of starvation in the last 5 years than all the last 150 years of war. The perspective. I'll say it again. More people have died of starvation in the last 5 years than the last 150 years of war. So it's pretty straightforward. You take that grain, you can feed all the people. In fact, if all the world went vegan, we'd be able to feed the world 7 times over. And you did live foods maybe 10 or 12 times over. It's like, we don't have a problem with population. That's an idea that's been planted in our mind to support the idea of eugenics. So forget it. We can feed this world 7 times over, and actually we can do better than that. So I'm just kind of bringing some real data into the discussion versus the globalist view that they're trying to get everybody to. We have limited water. Well, we do if we keep doing animal agriculture, for sure. Now this is interesting. The UN and the EU commissions have basically said we need to go to a vegan diet to preserve the earth. They don't say it as strong. No, they say, well, it would be a good idea, okay? But they can't, they're not ready to say it that strong. The data's blatant, but they can't say that. And they're basically saying the main 2 causes are the oil and stuff, but the main cause is animal agriculture. It's the main disruption of the environment. So when the UN and the European Commission says it, that's worth paying attention to. The European Journal of Clinical Nutrition, look what it says. This is a quote. Vegetarian vegan diets could play an important role in preserving the environment. Okay, they're saying it. We're not alone. Okay? But we have to teach people how to do it. So I'm talking to you, so we got to learn how to do this. So, and I want to not talk about it as moral superiority, okay? It's just common sense. Wisdom. The biblical wisdom is the wise person knows the results of their actions. And if we go vegan, even better, vegan live food, we are preserving the planet on many, many, many levels. That's the key thing. Now, there's a lot of resistance, and one of them is the mythical thing about live foods cause spleen Qi deficiency. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Raise your hand just so I can see. Okay, well done. Good. If you haven't heard about it, then you'll have it to deal with when it comes up. So this is a Chinese thing. There's a long history because they made some of these ideas based on the big famine they had in the 1930s. And spleen Qi deficiency is digestive weaknesses, blood sugar imbalances, diabetes, hypoglycemia, and so forth, eating disorders, weight problems, things like candida and so forth like that. Overall, low vitality and chronic fatigue. Overall, spleen Qi is low. Okay, so that's spleen Qi. That's what the claim is. If you're a vegan live fooder, that's what you're going to get. How true is that? Well, let's look at spleen Qi strength. You're going to have good energy. You're going to feel good. You're going to feel clear. Your memory is going to be clear. You're going to be strong. You're feeling good and happy. That's good spleen Qi. So, do you remember now the study, of the people who were 80% live food? What was that? Good muscle tone, good strength, emotional. It's just this. So really what we're talking about is the evidence shows that live food cuisine is the cure for spleen Qi deficiency, not the cause. But everything always gets turned upside down by the people who have the power of the media, even in those times. So if that comes up, then you know you have an answer. It's like, no, it's the cure, not the cause. Okay. The other thing is Vata. This is Ayurvedic, and basically Vata is one of what we call the doshas that get in balance. So here's the key thing to appreciate and understand is that it was true. Okay? It was true if you only do leafy greens and sprouts. That is the case. Life has changed. Now, live food cuisine, at least what we've done at the Tree of Life, we have seed pâtés and we have different spices, and really what balances the Vata is sweet, sour, oily, soupy, warm foods. And you can do that on live food. Okay? So that's the point, that there is no problem. I treat sometimes purebred Vatas. I'm joking a little bit, but anybody's Vata will know what I'm talking about. But basically, you can do it all in live food. You just need to know how to work with things, with the elements, to balance the Vata energy. You need more kapha in there, more ojas foods in there. And we have all of that now, whereas in the 1800s, no, we didn't have spirulina or chlorella. We did have bee pollen. Okay. So another thing is live food propaganda. Oh, are we getting enough lycopene? How many people have heard that question? Well, first, is lycopene even an essential nutrient? Second, what's too much? Well, what's enough? Some people estimate it could be 15 milligrams, but too much gets to be a big problem. Okay, I really like tomatoes, so we grow our own tomatoes, these great live food, organic, veganic tomatoes. That's going to give you 5 milligrams. We don't know just what you need, but the guess is somewhere around 15 milligrams. But what if you get too much? It can increase prostate cancer if you have it. It can increase lung disease, lung cancer. This is not such a good thing. These are some of the things that are there. It also can cause digestive disorders. So am I worrying about lycopene? We didn't even know of it, but you see those fears get planted in people's minds and people get kind of confused about it. So don't worry about it. Society is always taken by surprise by any example of common sense. Okay, so that's the kind of key thing. But there are some deficiencies. Now here's another thing to really, really get clear. Okay, meat eaters, and I'll tell you, about 50% of the people who come to me are making the transition into vegan. So about 50% of the people I see for evaluation are eating meat. Okay, so I get a pretty good feeling, but I'm also giving the research. About 90% of all pregnant women in the United States are deficient in DHA, incredibly a long chain omega-3. You need it for brain, you need it for emotions, you need it for vision. It's like 90% deficient? And guess what? This is all research done on meat eaters, okay? But it's also true for vegans. 80%, again, meat eaters, are deficient in magnesium, okay? 75 to 95% of the people are deficient in iodine. If people are going to be successful, we do need to take supplements in this day and age. There's just too much going on. So I use an I- iodine, which is the actual real form that you need for thyroid. But let's get clear. Iodine is needed for brain function, I mentioned. Mothers that have adequate iodine, their kids have 13% higher IQ, 13-point higher IQ. We need it for heart. Big deal. Almost everybody I see with heart problems is iodine deficient. Adrenals, ovary production of estrogen. It's like, whoa. And then the skin is the biggest organ for holding iodine. Isn't that interesting? My point. Everybody I see is, in America, that's that 95%. Almost everybody needs iodine, okay? You can't be successful vegan if you aren't taking some supplements. Actually, you can't be successful in anything. Because this is meat eaters. This is mostly on meat eaters, all these data. Okay, and of course B12, and it is true. Vegans have less B12 than meat eaters. But what's also true, and this is something I learned at Columbia, just randomly, they were doing research, giving people shots of B12, and I was amazed. 30% of the people had amazingly rebounded, felt great. What does that tell you? It means 30-40% of the people, meat eaters, were deficient in B12. That was my first clue that there was a bias here. So, and that's only at 200 nanograms. If we go to 400 to 450 nanograms to lower your homocysteine and things like that, oh my goodness, maybe 90% of vegans and 80% of meat eaters are deficient. What's my bottom line? Everybody needs to take a B12 supplement. And we use the living B12 supplement that are available that are made from bacteria, just like you get when you eat meat. But meat eaters need to take it too. That's my point, because meat eaters, a lot, are deficient in B12. Carnosine is another thing. The only way to get adequate carnosine, which is very important for rejuvenation and decreasing what we call glycosylation, which is the unnatural bonding of glucose or fructose to the protein. You need to eat 3 steaks a day to have adequate. So no meat eaters doing that. I mean, maybe some are, but most people aren't. So it's an easy supplement. There's a vegan thing. It's a bacteria-based thing, and you need like 1/8 of a teaspoon. You can get all this stuff at the Tree of Life. Obviously, I've worked out all these things, and I searched all over the world to get the right stuff. So we have a vegan carnosine. And that's extremely important for diabetics, but it's really for everybody in that. Minerals. In 1936, the Congress of the United States said 99% of the population's deficient in minerals. So everybody needs some level of mineral supplements, and we do a lot of that. Okay, so 85% of Americans are deficient in vitamin D. Everybody, okay? I'm talking meat eaters, because this is all done on meat eaters. There's enough vegans to do any research on, to be meaningful, okay? We're maybe 1 or 2% of the population. So this is all, everything I'm talking about is done on meat eaters. Okay, so when you're in an argument about, well, vegans don't get enough nutrition, guess what? You got the answer, right? Nobody's getting enough nutrition. So that really makes your life easy when you get that. People have trouble converting to vitamin A. About 50% of the population, we do need a vitamin A supplement. So those are the kind of things that everyone's deficient in. Just kind of keep that in mind as you look at the picture. It's like, what's going on? It's like everybody. So don't fall into vegans have an insufficient diet. It's just nonsense. Okay? It's important to keep that in mind. There is a difference between cuisine and macronutrient ratio. And this is absolutely key to understand the success. Cuisine is, well, there's live food cuisine, there's a French cuisine, there's Italian cuisine. It's a style. Okay? Like we'll do, French live food, Italian live food, it's style. Macronutrient balance is your key. Okay? That's the ratio of protein, carbohydrates, and fats to each other. And here's where it gets really interesting. There's a new field called Nutria Genomics. How many people have heard of that? This is important, okay? What's it saying? It says on chromosome 19, okay, our genes, it determines how much fat, how much protein, okay, and how much carbohydrate each person needs. And that's the genetics that comes from your mother, and it's in the mitochondrial DNA. Now, what I just said is what you need as a unique person with 20 to 30,000 genes, 200,000 gene variations, you got to work this out. Are you a person that needs more protein or less protein? There's no one answer. We're all unique. We're not a bunch of cows who just eat grass. Okay, kind of keep that in mind, okay? Don't take it personally. You're not a cow, okay? But what I'm saying is it's genetic. And our job to be successful, and this is really the key, is how to figure that out. Now, the Ayurvedics a few thousand years ago already talked about different types. You have a kapha, pitta, and vata, and there are different types and lifestyle. And that's another lecture, but I'm just making a point, not a new concept. And we have things called fast oxidizers, slow oxidizers, parasympathetic. What they're describing since the 1930s, okay, is we have to individualize our diet. So I wrote the book Conscious Eating. Why did I write that? Because we should be conscious. There is no one diet. Please get that. And you have to figure it out because you're a unique book. So I'm pointing it, I'm raising the question. Now we have the genetic proof of that too. So protein in the diet is pretty key. And the biggest problem with protein in the diet, when they say, are you getting enough protein? Well, we know really for years now that vegans really get probably twice the amount of protein they need. So the problem is too much protein even for vegans. Okay? And there is this research that just came out. It basically says people who do excess of protein in their kind of middle age, less than 65, okay, have double amount of mortality and 4 times more cancer. So we got to hit the right thing. What is that right thing? It's called the mTOR pathway. Somewhere between 35 and 70 grams, which is not very much protein, is the optimal protein that suppresses the mTOR pathway. When you activate it with too little protein or too much protein, which most people are doing, too much protein, you are doing just that. You're going to have 4 times more cancer. And that's what the research shows. Pretty interesting kind of question. So really, we don't need much protein. 35 to 70 grams. mTOR pathway is a real genetic pathway, and it, when it's suppressed by the proper amount of protein, you actually live longer, have less cancer. It's actually important. It's a longevity and anti-cancer thing. So that's really, really super important. We know that people, the research is showing that the Oxford research, 45,000 people, showed that people eating meat and so forth have 32% more heart disease. Okay, that's 40,000, 45,000. That's pretty impressive. And then we have research done with 121,000 people at Harvard. Again, people having a slice of meat 3 ounces the size of a deck of cards. We don't want to gamble with their life, okay? Size of a deck of cards, I think that's symbolic. Have 20% more mortality if it's particularly junk meat. And about 20% more heart disease and about 10 to 13% more cancer. So the data's there. For diabetes, meat eaters have, in the best studies, okay, have 35 to 50% more diabetes. So the message is in. It's not that complicated. Now what's interesting is for the longevity issue, plant-based proteins don't cause as much of a problem. Still, it's better to stay in there. Now after 65, this is a really revelation. I've been struggling with doing pull-ups, and I was at 26 pull-ups. And it's like, I'm not breaking through here. Then I read about, the fact is, when you're over 65, and my age is 72, and it's like, you need more protein, because we don't absorb the protein as well. As soon as I added 1 tablespoon of E3 Live, I went to 32, where I 32 pull-ups. So it's like, oh, it's that easy. So what I'm saying is we need the right amount of protein. With age, we need a little bit more protein. So after 65, we can go a little bit more because we don't absorb as well. Okay? So it's interesting. So life changes. There's no absolutes. There's a right amount of protein when you're 45, and it's different than when you're 65. We got to understand the change factors. And they did a Swedish study, and basically, people who had 3 glasses of milk had a 200% increase in death rates. Okay? It goes on and on how the subtleties, but basically, we decrease our risk. Now, this is interesting. There's studies out of Stanford. So 70% of the population needs a higher protein, and about 30% needs a lower protein. What are we talking about? 70 grams versus 35 grams. For most meat eaters, that's just low, period. Both are low. But we got to be kind of clear about that. This is the mTOR pathway. So we can get adequate protein. Nuts and seeds are really good. I'll just note that people who eat nuts in general will have 7% less mortality. If they have 4 times a week of nuts, it's up to 11%. And if you're having nuts every day, it's up to literally 13 to 20% less mortality. So nuts and seeds are very, very important life force energy. I'm just making the point. It's really high quality. Eat nuts, live longer, okay? We have all these things available to us, all these protein concentrates. And then we can get protein from the sprouts, but then you have to eat a bushel of sprouts to do that. Okay, so these are easier ways to do it. Fat, that's a big issue, very misunderstood. And I'm going to kind of sum it up, is that I compared our 25 to 45% fat diet to Esselstyn's 10% and Dr. Ornish's 10% fat diet. And we did pretty well. Cholesterol is not an issue, and I'll get to that. But nevertheless, in my study, the cholesterol went down to 159, which is the lowest I like to see. Now, Esselstyn uses statins, and they got to 137. That's dangerous, okay? Your rate of suicide at the lowest level of cholesterol is 6 times higher. Did you hear what I said? 6 times more depression and suicide if your cholesterol is too low, because you need cholesterol for your nervous system. If you're just at the lower 25%, you double the rate of suicide. I'm like, come on, we don't want that to happen. So we're worrying about heart disease, but a holistic view says, wait, there's more going on than that.
Excuse me, you wrote no fruit?
Yeah, for diabetics. This is a diabetic group. But I'll answer that later in the diabetes study. Later you have fruit, but not initially. And then Ornish, again, that. And what we see is we drop our triglycerides amazing amount to 82. That's what does cause heart disease. And the others increase. And the reason is carbohydrates increase triglycerides. So it's not working in the right direction for us. Then, you can see that a 25 to 45% fat diet actually can lower your cholesterol if it's a live food diet. Okay, milk, 54% fat, okay? Now, the cholesterol facts, and I'm going to summarize it up, is women with a cholesterol of 270 or more live 28% longer. The higher cholesterol, the longer you live. Now, that's really interesting. This has also been shown in the Framingham study, and we'll go in. Yeah, let's blow your mind. You'll get it. I just want you to hear it. People who are less than 160 have all kinds of trouble, but basically, there has been no connection between people who have more saturated fat or less saturated fat. A cholesterol of 160 to 260. Now, I'm talking about 30 years of study, about 1.5 million people involved in the different studies. So you should say what? Because in 1953 it all got low fat is the way. And I won't, another distortion of science, because that research was bogus. But I don't have time to get into that. So here's just study it basically with 21 studies. They mix them together, 340,000. Basically, the risk of heart disease between the people that have the lowest and highest fat was 0 difference. Okay? And this is about people who are older, really in the 89 and the 724. Now, here's the point. For every 39-point increase in cholesterol, there's a 15% decrease in mortality. This is all research, man, that's all. But it's good to ask because you should be shocked because all you've been hearing is low cholesterol is good. And I'm saying maybe not. High cholesterol is associated with better memory. A lot of research. National Institute of Health. People with the highest cholesterol score higher in cognitive results. This is the key study. This came out, Archives of Internal Medicine, the AMA Journal. Showed that all the studies for the last 30 years, there was no evidence to support the widespread mythical belief that limiting saturated fat is beneficial or protective for heart health or longevity. Isn't that interesting? That's the AMA. Who pays for their advertisement? Meat? No, but also the whole statin thing. This is this thing, you don't need statins. Well, the truth is you don't need statins. And from a diabetic point of view, statins increase the rate of diabetes 48 to 80%, depending. That's really bad news. Okay, cholesterol facts. Okay, but low cholesterol is a problem. And now I want to say it increases stroke, that's really important. Increases Parkinson, memory loss. I mentioned depression, okay, and I mentioned suicide. So my big concern, particularly as a psychiatrist, among other things, is, hey, you got a low cholesterol, we're going to have to improve. If you're less than 159, I'm going to give you some coconut oil because that's a danger zone for depression and suicide. Now here are the references. Just look at the idea of a lot of references supporting this. And this is 1.5 million clients. A lot of references, huh?
Were they all eating meat-based diets, perhaps?
I don't want to go into the whole discussion. I'm just talking about cholesterol. I'm just making the point. Now, omega-3 is important. Now, why is this important for vegans? One of the things I noticed, and I'm running another minute or two to conclude, is in the 80s, I saw a lot of people very imbalanced, vegan, live food people, because they weren't getting enough fat in their diet. They needed omega-3s for brain function, for nervous system function, for heart function, okay, and for anti-cancer. That's pretty important. So we kind of look at that whole picture here, and we need our omega-3s, we need our cholesterols, and it's safe. I want you to hear it. Your cognitive function will improve with age if you're getting enough. So that's the thing. And here are the references about the omega-3. It's the same thing. A big, long list of research saying what we need to hear. We need omega-3s, we need a cholesterol. Now, keeping that in mind, I'm just mentioning one more thing and then I'm going to round it up. The issue of grain. The Taoist masters used a principle called bigu. In the 11th century, the Taoist women, enlightened women, okay, literally, these are the enlightened women who danced on the jewel pond, really said grains block your transcendence. They also said eat live food. So basically, they ate a live food and non-grain diet. And they've been doing that from 475 BC. So I throw that out because of my work with diabetes. Grains really, you can ameliorate things with grains, but you can't really heal diabetes so easily. But we have trouble with grains affecting the brain, and the brain as well. So now you're going to go to the conclusion here, which is very simple. We'll talk about some of this tomorrow. But here's the fructose issues. Fructose is a problem too. For some reason, we took a little longer. But here we're going. Here's where I want you to see. This is the research I've done. This is not theory. This is the research I've done, is that an adequate live food diet, 25 to 45% fat, 25 to 45% complex green carbohydrates. I'm talking about vegetables, fruit, leafy greens, sprouts. That's what I'm talking about, okay? And 10 to 20% protein depending on your constitution. So that's the overall macronutrient ratio that I'm really focusing on. The bottom line, just to sum it up, in each generation, we're given the medicine for healing that generation. Live food veganism is the medicine for healing this generation, for the future, and for the preservation of the planet. Okay? So the holistic live food veganism is really the wave of the present and of the future. So that's the bigger picture. Not only for yourself, but for our children, our grandchildren, and so forth, but for the very healing of the planet. We've been given the medicine. So may everybody be blessed that we're successful in applying it to ourselves and to the planet. Amen.